Welcome to We Love the Hype, a podcast about advertising and PR from college lecturer Molly Wilkins. That's me. This podcast serves as a supplement for my classes, but is also open to the public with interviews and conversations that I hope will have engaging, enlightening, and entertaining stories about our industry. This first episode features an interview with my fellow lecturer and industry professional, Amanda Respess, also of Georgia College and State University. Let's go, y'all. I have with me senior lecturer here in the Mass Communications Department, Amanda Respess. Thank you for being the first podcast guest.
Hi, Molly. It's my pleasure.
So we talked a little bit beforehand, and what I would really love for you to talk about is about brand management and paid and earned media and all the stuff that you are already so fabulous at anyway.
Well, thank you. I love branding. I think we should always think about our strategic communication from a brand perspective. So that means all the brand touchstones. So I know, you focus on PR, fundraising, development, all of those are super important, but we can't leave out, our owned and our paid media from that mix because it completes the brand picture. Right. So that is always my focus, is to think about the whole brand and all the different parts of communication that goes into a brand.
So if you had to pick out a favorite campaign of yours, which I know is probably hard to pick one, but what's one that comes to mind?
My students who have had me before will know this, that Guinness, as in the beer, Guinness, is one of my favorites. They had a campaign that was global, which of course they're a global brand, and it was called the Made of More campaign. And you can look that up on YouTube and see some of their terrific campaign videos. Guinness struggled for a long time with finding a brand identity, and they had some real misses.
That's really interesting, because it's such an iconic brand.
Yeah, and it is. It's been around for so long. Of course, it's out of Ireland, out of Dublin. Arthur Guinness founded the company. You can go to the place where they make it. And then there's a whole history lesson behind this that I won't get bogged down in, but the per capita consumption of Guinness is actually higher in nations in Africa than it is in Ireland. They are truly a global brand. That goes back to colonialism.
Well,
and that's a whole other thing. But it is very popular worldwide. And so what's so impressive about the Made of More campaign is that they localized it to the different global markets that they went into. And so in Africa, for their Pan-African launch across multiple African nations, they changed it to Made of Black. And they really embraced, of course, Guinness, when you pour it and it settles out, is a very dark color. It's basically black. And so they used African artists, they used visual artists, musical artists, sports stars from rugby to integrate into that campaign and to make it localized to the different countries that they put the campaign into. So what you saw in the execution for paid media and some of their storytelling for both the UK and the US was quite different than what you saw in Africa, but it all went back to the Made of More and how our character is what defines us. And so they found stories to tell. They told the story of Gareth Thomas, who is a rugby player from Wales, who was not out to his teammates. And so he had a great story, and they did a full-length video of it, and then they cut it down to shorter spots, right, for viewing. But then in Africa, they featured some rugby stars who were, from African nations, and one who had survived like gang life and then become a rugby star. And so they focused on storytelling, but they did that in a way that their paid media was super engaging. They did some really big TV spots in the UK and the US. They supported first responders and military. So they really drew on a masculine audience, and yet it wasn't exclusive to men. They even did this amazing video that you should look up on YouTube that featured a Kanye track, Black Skinhead, in the background.
I love that song.
Yes, it's such a banger. It's such a bop. I mean, Kanye, he has his own PR issues, but that song is quite the thing. And so it's just, I love that campaign in all its parts because it was handled so well internationally.
That's awesome. And to backtrack a little bit, when you say paid media, for anybody who's listening who maybe is not in the class or isn't really familiar, like, what do you mean paid media? What is that?
Right. So that's a great question, because people who are outside the communication industry, or even people who maybe are more on the journalistic side of things, we pay for placements with advertising, right? I think, most people understand that when they see an ad, whether it's on their television, if they're still watching television, or when it pops up as a pre-stream, when they're watching a video online, or when something pops up sponsored in their newsfeed, that's all paid, right? There's money put behind that. But owned media, right? Owned media is when a company owns, like Delta owns the Sky Miles magazine, right? And newsletter and everything. We own our websites. We own our domains, right? For brands. We own our social media channels. So owned media, you have control over as well. But it's a mix of content, right? Yeah. And then finally, of course, earned media is public relations. We can't, and we should not, bribe journalists for coverage, right? You can't pay for news coverage. That is something that you write your press release. That's kind of our bread and butter. You pitch that, you develop those relationships. And so there's a great acronym. The older acronym is POEM, right? Paid, owned, earned media, POEM. The newer one that I love better is PESO, right? Which is paid, earned, shared, owned, because it takes more into account our organic and paid and sponsored social, right? Because social is such a big part of our media mix now that PESO is really the better model.
Yeah. So, and one thing I think is interesting is, especially when it comes to social, it can be really, really easy to blur the lines between paid, earned, maybe even owned. It can all kind of look the same sometimes. So how do you differentiate if you're a consumer?
As a consumer, it's very difficult. And so we need to all educate ourselves. This is why I think media literacy from early ages is so important. Even, you and I both have children. We're both watching what they consume online and trying to set them on a path of knowing that not everything on the internet is true, right? So paying attention to sources is really important. Interestingly, it's actually the boomer generation who is most prolifically sharing things that aren't true on the internet, because they're used to news sources and the things they see being vetted, right? And now everybody has access to the internet. Lots of people can be content creators. So we really, of course, need to check for verified sources. As practitioners, and anybody who's listening, of course, who are our students or who are practitioners in our industry, it's all about our ethics, right? Yeah. We call it native advertising. Now it's really pay to play, right? Yeah. Or it's an advertorial. Things that are made to look like editorial, to look like news, but that are really paid. For me, that crosses a line. I don't like that. I know that that's the name of the game in a lot of ways. But it was actually David Ogilvy, sort of the godfather of paid media and advertising, who said, people are more intelligent often than we give them credit for. They want to know they're being sold to, and they're okay with being sold to, as long as you're telling them factually and directly, what it is you're selling and why you want them to buy it. So it's important as a consumer to keep our eyes open, because that's not going to stop the blurring of the lines. Yeah. But as practitioners, we can do our best to meet the expectations of our consumers and really do the most ethical job that we can. I think that's important.
I think that's something that's really, really good to tap into, is the whole ethics behind it. And I guess I'll cross the line out of interviewer for a moment, because as somebody who's in that influencer world, I do have brand deals and that type of thing. And legally, I am supposed to put, like if something is an ad, I'm supposed to put hashtag ad. Yep. And really, ethically, I need to make sure I'm pointing out to people, hey, this is an ad. Hey, I've been paid to do this, or hey, this was gifted to me. For me personally, that's really, really important to preserve that kind of trust with my audience. But not everybody feels that way.
No, they don't. And I think that's extremely important. And again, our regulatory bodies can't keep up with the technology. Right. They have not been able to for 20 years now. They still can't, so there are recommendations, but the SEC, as in the Securities and Exchange Commission, not our football conference, they're not coming after you, Molly, right? If you forget the hashtag ad.
But they will come after Kim Kardashian.
Right, there you go, because she's very visible, right? So those celebrities who are endorsing, that should be clear. The lines, again, used to be clear. If Michael Jordan was in a commercial, we knew he was being compensated by Nike, right? So the influencer space, I respect the influencers that I follow the most when they disclose, I just got these amazing new pants. But remember, I'm an Amazon authorized, person.
Yeah.
And so I get a cut of this if you buy them, right? That's a disclaimer that one of my favorite sort of mommy bloggers always has. So I know that, but I also know that if she gets a product that's bad, she's not going to hold back from saying, you know what, this product wasn't good, or she's just not going to talk about it. She's not going to put it out there as something great if it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that trust and that rapport, you have to know your audience, right? And I think that you do. And
I'd like to think I do, but
and you're watching and making sure that you're, adhering to those things that are going to engender that trust.
And going back to even Kim K and some other celebrities, there was fairly recent news where a lot of them got in some serious trouble for promoting, cryptocurrency?
Yes. That was, I think it was even poor Lindsay Lohan who was on her way. Was that right? I think she was on her way back up, and then she's got hit by another, whammy of PR trouble. But that's something that the SEC, again, they're watching cryptocurrency. So, something that's like a handbag is a little different than endorsing and not disclosing you're being compensated for endorsing a financial product, right?
Right. Yeah. Because that's something that if people invest in and it goes belly up, it is a problem.
Yes, please watch The Big Short if you have not already.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to leave anybody listening to this with any kind of advice or just some snippet you want them to take away from this, what would it be?
We can curate our own media environments so much. I mean, that is what we do. We curate our own feeds on all of our platforms. We choose the sources that we follow. And then our own behavior, you may not be as familiar with this. Your own behavior on social media or online dictates then what gets sent to you, right? Our clicking profiles, that is, there's a reason Facebook is free, and that's because we are the product, right? Yeah. We make Facebook money through our behaviors. So just be aware that you have power as a consumer, right? And be intentional about your choices. I follow all the things, even the things that make me upset or that I don't necessarily like their take. It's important to surround yourself that's not an echo chamber. Yeah. So I follow a lot of different people and a lot of different news outlets and brands so that I get a full picture, and I don't, because I know just by my behavior, I'm going to box myself in by what I like and listen to. So I'm always trying to be conscious of my behavior, that I'm not putting myself into an echo chamber of only the things that I want to hear. And that will keep us all media literate. It will keep us all being good, global citizens and consumers. If we're aware that everybody is trying to curate to our preferences, but we have that power. We set up our own media environments. And so just make sure that you're not boxing yourself in and that you're listening to other voices.
And even specifically for those who are in PR, in public relations, I think that's even more important, because if you only understand your perspective and not anybody else's, I don't think you can be effective at handling PR, because typically you are not your only audience.
That's right. And especially for students, now is the time to find opportunities to practice talking to other audiences. In our program at George College, we have practicums, and students gravitate towards the ones that maybe they think will be easier because the audience is other students. But if you have the chance to work we have a practicum supervisor at the Science Center, and that might be intimidating because our students maybe are not about STEM, right? But that particular supervisor has said, no, I want a non-science person, because then they know how to talk to other non-science people and maybe get them interested in some of the things that we have going on here. So stretching yourself and practicing, learning about and being able to talk to a different audience other than yourself is critical. And, all of the great sort of minds of PR and advertising and communications have always said, shed your skin. You have to be able to get into the mind of your target audience. And if you can't do that, you're lost, no matter what whatever your goal is, whatever your objectives are. If you're not understanding your target audience, nothing you set up from there is going to work.
Yeah. And that's even more important to give yourself a wide berth now, because you may have a different audience thrown at you and you have to quickly adapt and kind of get in their head. I mean, one example was we had a exercise that I just kind of did on the fly last semester where I brought my daughter and her friends in, and quickly in class, students had to figure out, okay, how am I going to talk to 13-year-olds? And then they realized there's only a few years difference between me and a 13-year-old. However, our tastes are widely different and have changed widely since they were 13.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It goes up and down in terms of age and gender and experience and all of those things. There are so many tools for understanding a target audience more as you get out into the working world and you have access to databases and things like that. But again, in curating your media environment, make sure you're just getting a lot of different perspectives, because the more we put ourselves in our bubble, the less we're able to communicate with people who are different than us. And the world is only getting less homogenous. It feels small with the World Wide Web, right? We've made the world smaller and we can get access to so many people, but we really need to pay attention to the lived experience. And that's really important. We've heard representation matters. But if you are ever in a room making decisions about a target audience and there is not one person from that target audience who is at the table, there's already going to be a problem, right? So we've seen that so many times when, classically it's all men at the table, they're trying to market towards women, they get it all wrong. Similarly, if we talk about ethnicity, gender, lifestyle, we need to have people who are at the table who are actually representative, right?
Yeah.
So that we're actually getting to that target audience and making sense.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Molly. It's been my pleasure, and you did a great job.
Thanks. I do what I can. Special thanks to our guest today, as well as all the sponsors for my content production: Advanced Dental Arts, Katie Berg at Mayo Hill Law, El Sombrero Restaurant on Forsyth Road in Macon, Georgia, and Triple Dot Social. You can find links to all of their websites in the show notes. Be sure to give them a visit as a thank you for their support. Show music is Drop the Tapes by Track Tribe from the YouTube Content Creator Studio. Again, my name is Molly Wilkins, and I am a lecturer in the Department of Communication at Georgia College and State University in beautiful Milledgeville, Georgia. To learn more about me, check out all my social pages with the handle LoveMollyKate, or go to HelloMollyWilkins.com. Be sure to continue to follow along with us with this inaugural season of We Love the Hype.